right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Evernest Real Estate Investor Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Spencer Sutton, and I'm joined today with my co-host, Gray Hall. Gray, welcome back to the show, man. Welcome to fatherhood, too.
I know. Thanks. Been out for a couple of weeks. Got a newborn. We were talking about that before we jumped on. So yeah, all good and excited to be back.
All right. Well, I'm excited about this podcast. We have Zach Lemaster here with us. He is the CEO to Rent to Retirement, one of the nation's largest turnkey providers. I know we're going to talk about more than turnkey, but this is something that we know a good deal about, Zach, because in Birmingham, there's several different turnkey providers. I'm sure you know about it, but welcome to the show. Glad to have you on.
Yeah, awesome. Super excited to be here, guys. And I think a crucial time to be talking about some of the stuff we're going to cover today.
Yep, absolutely. So why don't we kick off? I'd love to hear kind of your story. It's very unique. We did have a guest on here not too terribly long ago, Gray and I did, who has a similar background, but it is very unique. And I'd love for you to tell our listeners about how you got into the business.
Yeah, sure. I'll try to give you as short version as I can here. So stop me if I go on tangents, but essentially my background has nothing to do with real estate. I have a background in healthcare. My wife and I are both optometrists by education. We met in optometry school in Portland, Oregon. My wife is Canadian. And Gray, just real quick, congratulations, of course. I know we talked before the show. Yeah. In Canada, they get sometimes they get a 6-month to 12-month paternity leave. And so you're back 2 weeks later, man, just burning it. So
2 weeks felt like a luxury. I've got friends that work at a German bank and they had like 4 months or something like that.
Yeah.
So, a little bit different stateside.
Yeah. Well, it can't keep you home too much. You get too comfortable and you never come back. But anyway,
right.
So I met my wife in optometry school. I was on an Air Force scholarship to pay for school. So I went into the Air Force after school and practiced optometry there for 7 years. That's where I started investing in real estate, just because it was always an interest of mine. And, really the first house I bought was a duplex, used a VA loan with no money down, house hacked it, lived in half, rented out the other half, really got the bug and really enjoyed it. And from there, it's the rest is history. I mean, one thing I tell people is, every single year since that first duplex we bought, which is about 15 years ago at this point, we've bought more and more real estate every single year, whether that's in, number of doors or, monetary value. We've just continued to scale just because, that's something I believe in, and has led us to eventually be at the point where we were able to retire from our career paths early in life as optometrists. We did move out to Colorado after I left the Air Force and practice in private practice, but we basically, I guess the crux point for us, which hopefully a lot of people can resonate with and listening potentially, is that we found that we could do better investing in different locations throughout the U.S., right? Not just investing in our own backyard and actually building a diversified portfolio, because real estate's dynamic and there's markets that are constantly changing. That was really what allowed us to excel our investing goals, to the point where we were able to, replace our active income as doctors. And that was kind of the birthplace of Rent to Retirement, because we had a lot of friends and family and colleagues that are saying, hey, we see what you're doing in real estate. We see your success. We want to do the same thing and invest in real estate, but, we don't know how to get started. Our local market's too expensive. We don't have the time or energy. So can we invest with you? And, that was kind of the birthplace. Before we knew we were in Turnkey, we were kind of just basically helping friends and family invest with us. And, fast forward, we're out today, we're focusing on about 11 different markets across the U.S. We do a lot of build to rent. So new construction is about 50% of what we do in single family and small multifamily. So it's been quite the journey.
Yeah, that is quite a journey. I mean, especially if you're listening and you've got one property or you're planning on buying that first property. I mean, talk a little bit about the transition from, hey, this is pretty cool. We house hacked this first deal, and let's buy our second property. Like, what is the mindset shift to go from like 1-2 properties to, hey, we're setting goals now. We're going to buy multiple properties a year, because that's a whole different ball game, especially for a busy professional like yourself.
Yeah. I mean, it was, I am kind of one of these people that maybe jumps into things quickly and, doesn't look back, the kind of the ready, fire, aim mentality, which has served me well in a lot of ways. And also, I've lost money because of that sometimes too, but I mean, that's just my mentality. I think a lot of real estate investors and entrepreneurs in general kind of have that hustle and that grind, right? Like they're out there making it happen, and just putting in the time and energy, but it was never overly complicated or stressful. Sure, there were different deals that didn't work out and we lost money. I mean, there's times we lost 7 figures with some bad partnerships and things like this. Wow. So we don't focus on that. And of course that was a challenge, but I mean, just going from 1 to 2 different duplexes to 4 the next year, it was just finding the right deals. And what I'll say too is that the market is always changing, right? Like right now, the very perfect example of this where, potential recession, we got banks closing, we have high interest rates, and there's just chaos. But there's always chaos. There's always something in the news. 2 years ago it was COVID, or 3 years ago, and people are saying don't invest in real estate, and then we had this crazy boom, right? And then we got a political election coming up, and war. Like there's always something. But we never got distracted with our investing, and we always found a way to be successful in any market cycle and continue to buy. Not every property we purchased has been a successful endeavor, but we've continued to invest over time, which has been, served us well.
I think that's the key, is over time. And hitting back to your point of there's never not chaos. Like 15 years ago was 2008. We're recording this in 2023. In hindsight, it was the best time ever to invest, but it probably felt pretty darn scary to be buying real estate in 08, 09, 2010. So it hammers home the point. Like today feels a little bit different. What's it going to look like in hindsight? And yeah, you've lost a little bit of money, but overall, I would wager to say you've probably made more than you've lost over the past 15 years, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's how real estate compounds, just owning real estate over time, and it's kind of the law of averages. I mean, we've also had some home runs in real estate too that we didn't expect, right? We were interviewing someone the other day, I forget who it was, to attribute the quote to them, but they talked about like the lottery ticket property or the lottery system in real estate or something. And basically the fact is, you buy a bunch of properties and you don't know, you're analyzing them to make sure that the cash flow works out well. Some of those may be duds, but maybe 1 or 2 of them are your lottery ticket property where they're in a market or something where they just take off and you can't foresee that. But over 10 years, I mean, that could be a lot of growth and appreciation or whatever the case is. And you only need a couple of those to make a dramatic change in your life. You know what I mean? But the main thing, to your point, Grace, we stayed consistent, right? We just stayed consistent all the time. And, real estate's a lifelong journey.
Yeah, and I think buying properties is one thing, Zach, but then what you've done, and again, the entrepreneurial, the hustle, kind of your mentality, but then going from, hey, I'm buying in my own backyard, I'm buying these duplexes, I can drive, I can look at them, to then out of state. So talk about that transition. Like, what did that look like to finally make the decision, like, hey, I can find a property in maybe a Birmingham, Alabama, or somewhere like that has better yields for me. What was that process like?
And before I forget, I just wrote an article for Bigger Pockets on the 5 top recession-proof markets for 2023, and Birmingham was right up there at one of the top. So,
you wrote that, because I actually read that. No, we didn't pay. 2 of our markets were in there: Kansas City and Birmingham.
Kansas City is our top Midwest market, and Birmingham's in there as well. I mean, we can talk about this as well, but I mean, just, the types of markets, and you got some of the tech and stuff going on in Birmingham and some exciting things. But I mean, these are markets that are just like, you don't have to worry about these crazy fluctuations. As long as the cash flow makes sense, your bread and butter rentals, just hold them over time, let real estate do what it does, and you can build a very sustainable portfolio. That's how we started. But our first out-of-state properties were not a success. We actually purchased from a turnkey provider. We bought in Southside Chicago. This was a scenario where they took a D- property and rehabbed it to an A-class standard, like granite countertops and things like this. It was a D-class property. The constant problems with tenants, just nonstop crime and violence and stuff. And we went out to visit, my wife and I did, to also see some friends, and they're like, well, hey, let's go look at these properties. And the cab driver wouldn't even take us to the location. So, I mean, that was
pretty bad.
That was my first experience buying out of state. We lost money on them, but we learned a lot. And that, actually, a lot of that was like, hey, and on top of everything, the provider, the guy we bought it from, he actually ended up dying. He got a brain aneurysm, a year later. It was very sad. He had a whole family, but we were left with these things to clean up the mess on our own. He also managed properties. So from that, basically, we were sink or swim and figured out a better system, to go out. But it was daunting. I don't always want to share these horror stories with people, because there is a right way that you can invest out of state and be very successful with it. And it's just being very intentional. A good thing about going the turnkey route and working with an established team like you guys is that, like, you've already done all that heavy lifting and you've already sorted out the right contractors. You have the right managerial systems in place, right? You don't have to go out there and reinvent the wheel and go through all these painful and expensive obstacles that many people are when they're trying to invest out of state. So for us, it was a challenging experience, but we didn't let that stop us from continuing to just, improve and continue to invest out of state, because I think that a lot, ourselves included, people that are very successful in real estate, they are likely diversified across many different markets. And, I think it's something you should be considering, especially if you live in a very expensive market where you can't cash flow.
So, I didn't want to, you mentioned horror stories. Listen, when Turnkey became popular back 2000, I don't know, 12, 13, 14, 15, like there were some shady things going on here in Birmingham with turnkey providers, right? So not every turnkey provider is created equal. I'd like to, what do people need to look for if they are thinking, hey, turnkey may be the right, avenue for me. I'm a busy professional. I just want to buy something. I don't want to deal with a rehab. I just want to buy it. Like, what do they need to be looking for? What are signs maybe of, somebody you wouldn't want to deal with, a turnkey provider?
I'll say this, and I actually think that in my opinion, you remove turnkey out of the picture as far as like labeling something turnkey. Sometimes that gives people a false sense of security, I think. And the way that I would approach it is, you're buying real estate, regardless. If you're buying from a seller, from a turnkey provider, you go through the exact same process. It doesn't matter. When you're purchasing a property, you need to have your appropriate due diligence, right? You need to have your third-party inspection. You need to have, the bank's going to require an appraisal. You need to be sure that you have free and clear title on the property. I would send the inspector potentially back out there if you're not easily able to verify that work has been completed from what's been negotiated. So those are certain things that I think just throughout the purchase process, you need to look at the location and do some due diligence. I will say it's hard being an out-of-state person to try to find out something about a neighborhood like in Birmingham. Sometimes the neighborhoods are very, on a microeconomic scale, they can vary, and so you have to, like, that's where you can leverage someone that is local. But on the business side, like on the property management and long-term, the same sort of thing. I would vet them the same way you would with a property manager. Ask for references, recommendations from people that have been in that market for a while is great. Look up what their public reputation is like online, right? That's very important. Yep. In today's day and age, if people are not good actors, they're not going to survive for very long, because people talk about it online, right? So just go through the normal steps you would verifying anything.
I think that's a good point. I think when people do hear turnkey, it's all done for me, and there's a lot of trust, but not a lot of verify. And sometimes I think it's because they don't know what to verify. And so I think there's so much education out there now that I think even more so than 10 years ago, people have a better gauge of like what to look for and what to ask for. But totally fair point. You want to look at every single property the same. And until you've got reputation or like experience dealing with one turnkey provider or a certain seller, you need to verify all these different things, because you can be in a world of pain buying that D-class property that looks like an A-class property. How much what do you advise newer investors? Should they go out to a market? Should they not go out to a market? How do you think about that when they're investing out of state?
Well, it's never a bad thing. I'll say that. Is it 100% necessary? I don't think so. I mean, most of the people there's properties here in Colorado that are 10 miles away from us that I've never seen that we own. And it's like, so it's okay. There's properties, most of our out-of-state properties I've never seen as well. And that is okay. You obviously want to do your due diligence. I think it would never hurt to go out and visit a team and, get a look and feel for the neighborhood. I mean, if you can do it, then do it, right? Maybe approach it as a business expense or something, whether that's before you purchase or eventually at some point in time, go out and visit a market. I do think that is a good thing. And I would encourage people to do that. I had one other point, Gray. What were we talking about beforehand with due diligence? Oh, the thing with contractors too, and I think anyone in real estate or business in general, sometimes you just don't know until you work with someone, right? And we've been through this all the time. Like, you can do all your due diligence in the world, but at the end of the day, and this goes a lot with even running my own business with hiring people, you just don't know until you work with someone. And so that is something you just, sometimes have to roll up your sleeves and get a little firsthand experience. And if things don't work out well, be quick to fire, and, whether it's your local property management team that's not doing the right thing or something else, and hire on the right people. Like, sometimes that's just part of business, is going through that. And I think there's two scenarios where people get into trouble with Turnkey or real estate in general, but especially with Turnkey because it attracts a lot of newer buyers. One is when someone's just not set out to be a real estate investor, which is okay. But you got to understand, even though you have a property manager, you still have to manage them. If you're the type of person who's going to lose sleep at night because your tenant doesn't pay rent or they're late for 3 days, and it's going to cause you undue stress, then maybe real estate isn't for you, right? Maybe you invest in other things. However, we all know the benefits of real estate and, different ways to do things. But the other scenario is, where you don't go through the due diligence like we were talking about, and you put too much trust on the seller. A lot of the turnkey people that you were referring to back in the day, these were cash transactions, low price properties, in 5 days, no inspections, you go through the normal due diligence. So I just wanted to make that point too.
Yeah, I think what I saw a lot back in the day was turnkey providers putting out, hey, here's the pro forma of this property, but they missed so much. They were not these were 1920. These houses were built in 1920. They had very little maintenance over the long period of time, built into their numbers. So it really just wasn't realistic. But I love the thought of, man, you've got to do your due diligence. You have to do your homework, and trust but verify. I like that. So how did you go from, hey, I'm helping some friends, right? Which is also very that's pretty nervous, right? When you're helping friends buy real estate, because you got to know that they're able to own real estate. They have to accept some of the risk because that's a relationship you have with them. So I'm sure there's some, that's a little bit nerve-wracking, but how do you go from helping friends to building a company that now does this on a very large scale?
Yeah, I mean, and to your point, it's we do this because we're passionate, right? And we have a large rental portfolio too. That is our retirement. But I mean, we do operate this business because we enjoy helping people and enjoy real estate. But yeah, I mean, I had this one colleague of mine that he's a good friend too. But we sold him a couple turnkey houses. It was in Columbus, Ohio, and they weren't terrible. They had some tenant issues. It came and go. Probably more vacancy than we anticipated. More maintenance. And he just complained to me the entire time he owned them. And it's like, oh, I wish this, we never I was offered to buy him back. But then he sold them 2.5 years later, and timing is good with this, of course, right? But they had appreciated 100%. So, he within a few years. So it's you complain the entire time, but your ROI is through the roof.
Yeah, right.
So exactly. It was just funny. But I think to answer your question, Spencer, on just, you were asking about the transition, right? From going to make this into an actual business. I mean, we just kind of saw the demand. I mean, of course, it just kind of naturally grew organically. We had people that would start to refer to us, right? And then, as our own holdings are quite dynamic. So, I mean, sometimes, we're actually in the process now of transitioning out of residential in a lot of cases, where we're, 1031ing into larger commercial assets just to capitalize on the equity that we've gained. And so, we don't always want to just buy everything and hold everything. And we found that, hey, as there's more opportunity, there's also higher demand out there for other people across the country and internationally, actually, that want to invest in the United States. The United States has a lot of opportunity that most other countries don't have access to, from a lending perspective, from a tax perspective, from a real estate and ownership perspective. So we just kind of learned that there's a lot of opportunity and, continue to increase our property inventory to meet the demand. We've had pretty extensive growth year after year. This year slowing down a little bit with where interest rates are at, but
it's weird. It's slowing down for y'all. I don't know why that would be with interest rates.
Yeah, right.
States.
I'm a preacher of like, interest rates don't matter, right? What matters is, buying real estate, holding it over time, education. Right now we still have great accelerated appreciation available. So it's like, if sometimes, we all see it, right? The newer investor with the interest rate is, I'm cash flowing $70 less a month than I would at a lower interest rate that we'll likely never see again in our lifetime.
Yep.
So it's like, does that mean you're not going to invest and do anything? Did you run the numbers at the cash flow and all these things you could have achieved like during the period of time when you were doing nothing? Anyways, I digress.
Talk about what are some of your favorite turnkey markets and like typical types of properties that you guys are selling to investors.
The standard kind of typical turnkey house would be what you guys are used to expect, with a kind of B class bread and butter rental, this 3 or 4 bedroom, 2-3 bath, 1,200, 1,500 square foot house in the Midwest or Southeast. That's got, we don't really see the 1% rule anymore, but especially if you're in a decent area, you can still get an 8%, 10% cash on cash return. Maybe you're putting a little bit more money down on it, but that's kind of your standard turnkey rental. We do have some small multifamily 2 to 4 units as well. We really like our top markets are the ones that I wrote about in that article. So Birmingham, Alabama is up there, right? Kansas City is our top. Yeah, that's right. Kansas City is our top Midwestern market, shortly followed by Akron and Barberton, Ohio, right outside of Cleveland. One thing that we found is that right now, especially, we've been very successful in some of these like secondary markets where you're maybe not in a large metropolitan area, but you're still within like half an hour commutable distance or 45 minutes to this city center where people could still potentially work there or access city, but they're just, it's more like a family oriented suburb type of scenario where you have a little bit more accessibility to better price points and rental. And so we've been really successful in a lot of those areas. Those type of markets.
That is. Yeah. Why do you think that is?
I think people are moving out as especially in areas that have a general population growth. My assumption is that, well, one, when you have an area where you're in the path of progress, so the Sun Belt, we know that there's people just massively moving south, right? In general, there's all areas are going to grow as well, right? So there's different areas that will grow at different rates, but also, especially now that we have these, and I just learned this term the other day, but it makes complete sense. I think it was, you'll probably know, Gray, it's like a tech nomad or something. What do they call IT nomads? Yeah. Basically, people working from home are at a higher rate than ever before, and COVID expedited that. So I think there's a lot of people that are moving out to areas that are less densely populated. Also, right now, if we look at just kind of demographics of people that are creating families that are in this age range, this millennial age range, like there's a lot of newer families that are being created where people are moving out to areas. So I think it's a combination of all those things. Also, as cities become more expensive, sometimes, one of our best markets is Polk County outside of Orlando, where, Orlando's crazy expensive, but you can be 45 minutes out and be at like 20% of the cost, right? And still have a larger house and things like that. So cost of living plays into that, maybe taxes, but still accessibility. I think it's a combination of things, but those are our best Midwestern markets. And we, of course, like Alabama in the Southeast, but Florida is probably our biggest market for new construction. We pretty much exclusively focus on new construction in Florida, and there's been some areas that have done exceptionally well there.
Yeah, talk about that. So you had mentioned, hey, we're doing a lot of stuff and kind of the build for rent. Like, is that full-on communities that you guys are owning, or y'all building one-off properties that you're selling to the short-term rental or turnkey buyers? What does that look like?
Yeah, in the build to rent space, there's a few different ways that we participate with investors. We have one option where they can come in and we finance and build the house with our building partners and then sell it to an investor as a turnkey investment. Your typical purchase process, maybe you put a deposit down to reserve it, 2 months out or something. The other option is for people to participate from the ground up construction as well and actually hold the debt for the construction. Now there's more risk with that, and you have to be, patient for the build process to ensue, but that is an opportunity for someone to come in with immediate equity, like significant immediate equity. But even really at the point we're seeing right now, well, to answer your first question, these are not communities. These are like infill. There's a lot of land availability, but we basically have a handful of models, rental models that, we kind of optimize the space and usage of it to build on a build to rent. And these are houses that we're building in, multiple different locations throughout mid and southwest Florida. But right now we see a lot of opportunity where, since things have slowed down a little bit, like prices have softened just enough where it's not this crazy demand where you have to reserve stuff a year out like it was, over the past few years. It's a great build to rent is a great opportunity for someone to come into an A-class house in a good area that's going to appreciate well, still have decent cash flow considering it's new construction, have zero maintenance and warranties on these things, and also come into immediate equity. One example would be we have this house it's a nice building. You can see it on our website, but like Northport and Poinciana in Florida, those are two different locations, but we build the same model there where it's $320,000 to purchase. It rents out for $2,400 a month, and it appraises at $350 to $360. So all things considered, it's a very well-rounded investment where you do have immediate equity and you can still cash flow on it.
That's pretty interesting. That's just a whole new take on buying a 1940s house that you can get for $120 that you rent out for $1,000 a month. It takes a little bit more upfront cash, but I think for a certain type of investor, that's a lot less headache potentially to step into a newer built property. And I think I don't hear a lot of people doing that. Now, I think you kind of hear build for rent communities, but I think it's a pretty interesting model and just a great option to offer somebody who's willing to put down $70,000, $80,000 and thinks of it a lot more long-term. Because it's not going to cash flow as well as maybe a C-class property, but it's got a lot of other benefits in there. I think it's a pretty interesting strategy.
Long-term, I think it will be better performance. Yep. But you're absolutely right. It's just more expensive. It requires more money. You also get likely better tenant quality. I think some of the rents are higher as well. And I think what I would recommend to everyone is having, again, a diversified portfolio. I would never tell anyone, put all of your eggs in one basket and buy only in Southwest Florida, right? But I do think diversifying across maybe some of these higher cash flow type of turnkey rentals and maybe mixing in one or two of these, that's a great way to go, to have a diversified portfolio.
Yeah, we talk a lot about that. I think we operate in 20 or so different markets, and so you've got the C-class properties that have higher yield, but you've also got the Nashville's, the Denver's, the Floridas, where you can start to sprinkle that in. I think investors start with the yield, and as they get more capital or they start making more money in their day job, they can put that away for, hey, this is money in 15 or 20 years. I think it's a good way to kind of diversify across multiple different markets. And so you get different cycles, different markets, different growth. And then back to your lottery ticket, you don't know which one is going to hit, but you're kind of spreading out, spreading the opportunity out to cover a bunch of different markets.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think I see investors get in trouble is when they are looking at a area. Let's just take the Southeast, Birmingham, Alabama, maybe one of these tertiary markets for higher yield, and they put in all the money that they have, expecting that there's not going to be a problem, that there's not going to be vacancy, that there's not going to be maintenance that they're going to have to do. Like when those people tend to get in trouble. So just make sure you work the numbers and you know the numbers before you invest anywhere, really. So kind of switching gears or talking about that, like how does somebody, you've got this company, Rent to Retirement, how does somebody, what does a client do if they were looking to invest with you? Like, what is the process like? We want to work with everyone kind of on a one-on-one basis. Yes, we're selling turnkey properties, but our goal is to create long-term partnerships with all of our investors where we take a comprehensive approach to help them build a successful business model. When you're investing in real estate, you are building a business and you should approach it and operate it like a business. So you need to make sure you have the right tax structure, and legal structure in place. And as you grow your portfolio, doing things like
1031s, potentially cost segregation, whatever the case is. I mean, you need your team of professionals, and we want to take that comprehensive approach to help people with all those ancillary things about running their rental business. But the first thing they do is, just reach out to her. I mean, we've got a ton of education stuff out there on our social media platforms, YouTube, tons of content to read and blog articles and things like this. So, I mean, our job is to add value to everyone, but ultimately, if you're interested to learn about turnkey investing, we want to have you schedule a consultation with one of our investment strategists to go over your goals, criteria, timeline, and talk about some of the markets so we can match you, give you some guidance and match you with the right markets and properties. We don't charge investors anything for this. We make our money through the sale, right, of these properties, right. But that's kind of the path to follow.
Awesome. So what is the website, Zach?
It's rent2retirement.com. So that's rent2retirement.com. And we do have an 800 number where people can reach out. It's 800-311-6781. Of course, I mentioned that article that I just wrote about the 5 top recession-proof markets. We also have another article we came out with, the top 20 cash flow markets for 2023. If you'd like a copy of either of those resources, just please reach out and ask for it, and we'd be happy to send it over to you along with anything else.
Yeah, it's a great article. I actually shared it with our sales team because our sales team are talking to investors in all these different markets, and specifically, you mentioned 2 of our markets in the Kansas City and Birmingham. Well, Zach,
tell anyone. We gotta keep that secret to ourselves.
That's right. That's right. Well, Zach, man, thanks for being here. This has been great. Sounds like you've been wildly successful over a long period of time. So, man, yeah, we hope that you continue to have that success. And yeah, thanks for being here.
Pleasure's all mine, gentlemen. Appreciate you.
All right, everybody, that's it for this episode, and we'll be back with another one of the Evernest Real Estate Investor Podcast.